The blizzard had been howling for 3 days straight when Vincent Vargas heard the sound that would change his life forever. A desperate scratching at his cabin door that was barely audible over the screaming wind. He set down the saddle he had been oiling and moved toward the entrance, his hand instinctively reaching for the rifle beside the door, because even in the worst Wyoming winter, danger could come calling. What he found when he pulled open the heavy wooden door was not a threat, but a woman collapsed in the snow, her lips blue and her body shaking with violent tremors, ice crystals clinging to her dark hair and frozen eyelashes. Vincent did not hesitate for even a moment before he scooped her up in his arms, shocked by how light she felt, how fragile, and carried her inside his cabin as the wind tried to tear the door from his hands. He kicked the door shut behind him and rushed to lay her on his bed near the fireplace, his heart pounding as he assessed her condition with the practiced eye of someone who had seen plenty of hardship in his 30 years. Her clothes were soaked through, practically frozen to her skin, and when he pressed his calloused hand to her forehead, he felt heat radiating from her that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. Fever. She was burning up despite being half frozen, which meant she had probably been sick before she even started wandering through the blizzard. Vincent worked quickly, knowing that every second counted if he was going to save this stranger's life. He peeled off her frozen outer layers with careful hands, trying to maintain what modesty he could, while knowing that leaving her in wet clothes would kill her faster than the fever. Once he had her wrapped in his warmest blankets, he stoked the fire higher and put water on to boil, racking his brain for everything he knew about treating fever and exposure. His mother had been a practical woman who taught him the basics of healing before she passed, and he had picked up more knowledge during his years working cattle drives and living alone in the Wyoming wilderness. He made a tea from willow bark to bring down the fever, and used snow from outside to make cold compresses for her forehead, alternating between trying to warm her frozen extremities and cool her burning brow. The woman did not wake, did not even stir except for the occasional moan or whimper that made Vincent's chest tighten with worry. As the first night wore on, Vincent found himself studying her face in the firelight, wondering who she was and what had brought her to his isolated cabin 15 miles outside of Sheridan, Wyoming. She was young, probably in her mid-20s, with delicate features that would have been beautiful if they were not drawn tight with fever and exhaustion. Her dark hair had dried into soft waves that spread across his pillow, and even in her desperate state, there was something about her that called to something deep inside him. He shook his head at his own foolishness, focusing instead on keeping her alive through the long winter night. By morning, the blizzard had finally broken, leaving the world outside blanketed in pristine white that stretched as far as the eye could see. Vincent had not slept, keeping vigil beside the woman and changing her compresses regularly, coaxing water and tea between her cracked lips whenever she seemed even slightly conscious. Her fever had not broken, but it had not gotten worse either, which he took as a small victory. He made himself breakfast, and then prepared a thin broth, hoping that he might be able to get some nourishment into her if she woke. It was late in the afternoon when her eyes finally fluttered open, dark and unfocused, confusion written clearly across her features as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. Vincent was at her side immediately, setting down the harness he had been mending. "Easy now," he said softly, his voice rough from disuse and worry. "You are safe. You collapsed at my door during the storm." She tried to speak, but her voice came out as barely a whisper, her throat clearly raw and painful. "Where?" "My cabin about 15 miles west of Sheridan," Vincent told her, lifting a cup of water to her lips. "Drink slowly. You have been out for near 24 hours now." She sipped the water gratefully, her eyes never leaving his face, as if she were trying to determine whether she should trust him. When she had drunk her fill, she lay back against the pillows, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "Thank you," she managed to say. "I thought I was going to die out there." "You nearly did," Vincent said honestly, pulling a chair closer to the bed. "The fever alone might have killed you, never mind the cold. What were you doing wandering in a blizzard?" Pain flashed across her face, and Vincent immediately regretted asking. "I am sorry," he said quickly. "That is none of my business. You need to rest and recover. We can talk about everything else later." But she shook her head weakly. "No, you deserve to know. You saved my life." She took a shaky breath, gathering her strength. "My name is Nadine Zimmerman. I was traveling with a wagon train heading west, but I got sick a few days before we reached Sheridan. The fever came on so fast. When we stopped, the wagon master said I was slowing everyone down, that they could not afford to wait for me to recover. They left me in town, promised someone would look after me, but the woman they left me with." She closed her eyes, and Vincent saw tears squeeze out from beneath her lids. "She took what little money I had and put me out in the cold. I tried to find help, but everyone was sheltering from the storm. I just started walking, hoping to find somewhere, anywhere. I do not even remember how I found your cabin." Anger burned hot in Vincent's chest at the cruelty of strangers who would abandon a sick woman in the middle of winter. "Well, you are here now, and you are safe," he said firmly. "I will not turn you out, Miss Zimmerman. You will stay here until you are fully recovered, and we will figure out what comes next when you are well." Relief flooded her features, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I do not know how to thank you." "No thanks needed," Vincent said, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Any decent person would do the same." But even as he said it, he knew it was not true. Nadine had already encountered multiple people who had chosen cruelty over kindness, and Vincent found himself grateful that she had somehow found her way to his door instead of perishing alone in the snow. Over the next few days, Vincent devoted himself to nursing Nadine back to health with a dedication that surprised even him. He made her nourishing broths and herbal teas, changed her blankets when fever sweats soaked them through, and sat with her during the long nights when the fever dreams came, and she cried out in fear and confusion. He learned during those fevered rambles that she had been heading west to meet a man she was supposed to marry, someone her father had arranged the match with through letters. He learned that she had grown up in Pennsylvania, that her father had died 6 months ago, leaving her alone in the world, and that the marriage had seemed like her only option for survival. Vincent found himself growing angry on her behalf all over again. Angry at a world that left women with so few choices that they had to travel across the country to marry strangers just to have a roof over their heads. He was also surprised by how much he looked forward to the moments when her fever would break temporarily, and she would be lucid enough to talk with him properly. She had a quick wit and a sharp intelligence that showed through even in her weakened state, and she asked him about his life with genuine interest that no one had shown in years. He told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, about how he had lost his parents to illness when he was 20, and had spent the next decade drifting from place to place, working cattle drives and trying to outrun his grief. He told her about how he had finally saved enough money to buy this piece of land and build this cabin 2 years ago, about how he ran a small herd of cattle and broke horses for extra income, living a solitary life that had suited him just fine until 3 days ago. By the end of the first week, Nadine's fever finally broke for good, leaving her weak but clear-headed. Vincent helped her sit up for the first time, propping pillows behind her back and bringing her a bowl of real stew instead of broth. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, and Vincent tried not to notice how pretty she looked with color finally returning to her cheeks and her dark eyes bright with life instead of fever. "I have been thinking," Nadine said after she had finished eating, setting the bowl aside with careful hands, "about what I should do next. I obviously cannot go to Sheridan and marry someone I have never met, not after everything that happened. But I also do not have any money to get back east, even if I wanted to go, which I do not. There is nothing for me there anymore." Vincent had been dreading this conversation, knowing it had to come but not wanting to face the reality that she would have to leave eventually. "You do not need to worry about that right now," he said. "You are still recovering." "Vincent," she said, and he loved the way his name sounded in her voice, soft and warm. "You have been incredibly kind to me, kinder than I had any right to expect from a stranger, but I cannot impose on your hospitality forever. I need to figure out how to support myself." "What did you do back in Pennsylvania?" Vincent asked, trying to think of practical solutions even as part of him rebelled at the very idea of her leaving. "I helped run my father's boarding house after my mother died," Nadine said. "I can cook and clean and manage household accounts. I can read and write and do mathematics. I am not afraid of hard work." "Then work here," Vincent said, the words coming out before he had fully thought them through. When Nadine stared at him in surprise, he pushed forward, trying to make the arrangement sound purely practical even though his heart was pounding. "I could use help around the place, honestly. The cabin is always a mess. I eat whatever I can throw together quickly, and I am terrible at keeping track of expenses and supplies. If you stayed on as a housekeeper, I could pay you wages. Not a lot, but enough that you could save up some money and decide what you want to do next. And you would have a safe place to stay while you recover your strength and make plans." Nadine was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as if trying to read his true intentions. "That would not be proper," she finally said. "A single woman living alone with a single man. People would talk." "What people?" Vincent asked, gesturing at the empty wilderness outside his windows. "My nearest neighbor is 8 miles away, and I only go into Sheridan once a month for supplies. No one needs to know anything about your living arrangements." "You would know," Nadine said softly. "And I would know. I do not want you to think that I am the kind of woman who would take advantage of your kindness or compromise your reputation." Vincent leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, trying to make her understand. "Miss Zimmerman, Nadine, my reputation can handle just about anything. I am a bachelor rancher living alone in the middle of nowhere. No one expects me to be a pillar of proper society. But you need somewhere safe to stay, and I genuinely could use the help. This does not have to be permanent. Just until you are back on your feet and have enough money saved to make a real choice about your future, not a desperate one." He watched the internal struggle play out across her expressive face, practical necessity warring with propriety and pride. Finally, she nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "But only until spring. By then I should be fully recovered and have enough saved to make other arrangements, and I will work hard to earn my keep, I promise you that." "I do not doubt it," Vincent said, relief flooding through him even as he told himself it was only because he had found a practical solution to her problem, not because the thought of her leaving had felt like a knife to his chest. The second week brought more snow, but Vincent did not mind being snowed in with Nadine. She was still too weak to do much actual work, but she insisted on helping where she could, mending his worn shirts while sitting by the fire and giving him advice on organizing his cluttered cabin. They fell into an easy routine, eating meals together and talking late into the evenings about everything and nothing. Vincent learned that she loved reading but had not owned many books, that she had always wanted to see the mountains, and that she made the best biscuits he had ever tasted, once she was strong enough to try her hand at his stove. Nadine learned that Vincent had a dry sense of humor that snuck up on her when she least expected it, that he could carve beautiful figures from wood during the long winter evenings, and that he was far more educated than his rough exterior suggested, his mother having been a schoolteacher who insisted her son learn to read and write properly. She also discovered that he was unfailingly gentle despite his size and strength, never crowding her or making her feel unsafe, always careful to give her privacy and respect her boundaries. As January turned into February, Nadine grew stronger, taking over more of the household duties and bringing a warmth to the cabin that had nothing to do with the fire in the hearth. She reorganized his chaotic supplies, made curtains from spare fabric she found in his storage trunk, and cooked meals that made the small space smell like a real home instead of a bachelor's survival shelter. Vincent found himself hurrying through his outdoor chores so he could get back inside, drawn by the sight of her moving around his kitchen, or sitting in the rocking chair he had built, her face peaceful in the firelight as she read one of his few books for the third time. He was falling in love with her, and he knew it was foolish and dangerous and completely hopeless. She was educated and refined, the daughter of a businessman, even if that business had only been a boarding house. She deserved better than a rough cowboy, who lived alone in the wilderness with only his horses and cattle for company most of the year. She had plans to leave in spring, to make something of herself, and he had no right to ask her to give up whatever future she might build for herself just to stay here with him. But knowing all that did not stop his heart from racing when she smiled at him, did not stop him from treasuring every moment they spent together, did not stop him from lying awake at night in his bedroll by the fire, listening to her breathe softly in his bed across the room and wishing things could be different. Nadine was having her own internal struggles, though she tried to hide them. She had been so certain when she left Pennsylvania that she was doing the right thing, that marrying a stranger and building a new life in the West was her only option. But now, living in this tiny cabin with Vincent Vargas, she was discovering what it felt like to be truly cared for, not as an obligation or a convenience, but as a person. Vincent listened when she talked, really listened, and remembered the small details she mentioned. He made her feel safe in a way she had never experienced before, even with her own father who had loved her, but had always been somewhat distant and distracted. She caught herself watching Vincent when he did not know she was looking, admiring the competent way he moved through the world, the strength in his hands that could be so gentle when he helped her with something, the kindness in his eyes when he looked at her. She had never felt this way about anyone, certainly not about the faceless man she had been traveling to marry, and it terrified her because she did not know what to do with these feelings. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary, just until spring, and then she would leave and find her own way in the world. Getting emotionally attached to Vincent would only make that harder, would only lead to heartbreak for both of them. He had been clear that he was offering her work and shelter, nothing more, and she would not repay his kindness by making things awkward with unwanted feelings. But it was getting harder to maintain that emotional distance, especially during the long evenings when they would sit together and talk for hours, their conversations ranging from practical matters to philosophy to dreams they had never shared with anyone else. It was during one of those evenings in mid-February that everything changed. They had just finished dinner, and Nadine was washing the dishes while Vincent dried them, a routine they had fallen into without discussion. Outside, the wind was howling again, Another storm rolling through, but inside the cabin was warm and cozy. Nadine had been quiet all evening, and Vincent could sense something weighing on her mind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly, setting aside the plate he had been drying. Nadine was silent for a moment, her hands still in the warm dishwater. "I was thinking about how strange life is," she finally said. "2 months ago, I thought I knew exactly what my future would be. I was going to marry a rancher in Wyoming, be a dutiful wife, maybe have children someday. It was not what I would have chosen for myself, but it seemed like a solid, respectable life. And now," Vincent prompted when she trailed off. "Now I do not know anything," Nadine admitted, pulling her hands from the water and drying them on a towel. "I thought I wanted security and respectability, but living here with you, I have realized that what I really want is to feel alive, to feel like my life matters, like I am more than just someone fulfilling a role." She turned to look at him, her dark eyes intense in the firelight. "You make me feel that way, Vincent. Like I am a person worth knowing, not just a woman who needs to be taken care of." Vincent's heart was hammering in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm, not to read too much into her words. "You are worth knowing," he said quietly. "Any fool can see that." "Then why do I feel like I am still just passing through?" Nadine asked, and there was frustration in her voice now. "Why do I feel like I am waiting for permission to want what I want?" "What do you want?" Vincent asked, the question barely more than a whisper. Nadine held his gaze, and in that moment something shifted between them, all the careful politeness and proper distance falling away. "I want to stay," she said. "Not as your housekeeper, not as a temporary arrangement. I want to build a life here with you if you will have me." Vincent felt like the air had been knocked from his lungs. "Nadine, you do not know what you are saying. You have been through so much, and you are grateful, but that is not the same as wanting to spend your life on an isolated ranch with a man you have only known for 2 months. "Do not do that," Nadine said, her voice sharp now as she stepped closer to him. "Do not tell me what I feel or reduce my feelings to gratitude. I know my own mind, Vincent Vargas. I am 24 years old, and I have spent my entire life doing what was expected of me, being practical and sensible and proper. For once in my life, I want to do something because it makes me happy, because it feels right. And this, being here with you, feels right." "I am not an easy man to live with," Vincent said, but he could feel his resolve crumbling, hope rising in his chest despite his best efforts to suppress it. "I am used to being alone, and I can be stubborn and difficult. This life is hard, Nadine. Lonely winters and endless work and sometimes danger. You deserve better than that." "What I deserve is to make my own choices," Nadine said, and now she was close enough that Vincent could smell the lavender soap she had used, could see the determination in her eyes. "I am not asking you to promise me an easy life, Vincent. I am asking you if you feel what I feel, if there is any chance that you might want me to stay for real, not just as an employee but as a partner, as someone who shares your life." Vincent reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and cupped her face gently in his rough hands. "I have been falling in love with you since you first opened your eyes and looked at me," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "I did not say anything because I thought I had no right, because I thought you deserved better than what I could offer. But if you are truly saying that you want this, want me, then yes. God, yes, I want you to stay." Nadine's smile was radiant, her eyes shining with tears of happiness as she leaned into his touch. "Then I am staying," she said. "Not until spring. Forever." Vincent kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that held all the longing and hope and love he had been keeping locked inside. Nadine kissed him back with equal tenderness, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, and in that moment everything else fell away. The storm outside, the hardships they had both endured, the uncertain future, none of it mattered compared to the feeling of finally admitting what they meant to each other. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "We should do this properly," he said. "I should court you, give you time to be sure." "We have been living together for 2 months," Nadine pointed out with a laugh. "I think we have moved a bit beyond traditional courtship." "Then I should marry you," Vincent said, the words coming out more certain than anything he had ever said in his life. "I do not have a ring, and I cannot promise you luxury or society, but I can promise that I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "That sounds like a proposal, Mr. Vargas," Nadine said, her voice soft and teasing. "It is, Miss Zimmerman," Vincent confirmed. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," Nadine said without hesitation. "Absolutely yes." They spent the rest of that evening making plans, talking excitedly about the future like children planning an adventure. They would go into Sheridan as soon as the weather cleared and find a preacher to marry them. Vincent would introduce Nadine as his wife, and they would build their life together without worrying about what anyone else thought. Nadine suggested improvements to the ranch that showed she had been thinking about staying longer than she had admitted, and Vincent found himself sharing dreams he had long ago given up on, dreams that seemed possible now that he would not be facing the future alone. That night, Nadine slept in the bed while Vincent took his usual place on the bedroll by the fire, but everything felt different now. They were not strangers sharing a space anymore, not employer and employee, but partners planning a future together. Vincent lay awake for a long time, listening to the storm outside and the crackling fire, feeling like the luckiest man alive. The weather cleared 3 days later, and Vincent hitched up his 2 horses to the sleigh he used for winter travel. Nadine bundled up in the warmest clothes they could piece together from Vincent's wardrobe, and some modifications she had made to her own clothes, and they set out for Sheridan in the crisp winter morning. The journey took several hours, the horses pulling steadily through the deep snow, but Nadine did not complain once, her face bright with excitement despite the cold. Sheridan was a small but growing town, with a main street lined with businesses and a few side streets of homes. Vincent had never spent much time there beyond getting supplies, but now he looked at it through Nadine's eyes, seeing it as the nearest thing to civilization they would have regular access to. He drove the sleigh to the general store first, wanting to get supplies before they dealt with anything else. Inside the store, a kindly older woman named Mrs. Patterson greeted them with curiosity evident on her face. Vincent was a familiar sight, but he never brought anyone with him and certainly never a woman. "Good morning, Vincent," she said warmly. "Who is your friend?" "This is Nadine Zimmerman," Vincent said, his hand warm on Nadine's back. "She is going to be my wife. We are here to find a preacher and make it official." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but her smile was genuine. "Well, congratulations to you both. Reverend Thompson lives just 2 streets over in the White House next to the church. He should be able to help you." They thanked her and completed their shopping, Mrs. Patterson insisting on throwing in some fabric for a wedding dress as a gift, her eyes twinkling with romantic pleasure at their story. Word seemed to spread quickly in the small town, and by the time they made their way to Reverend Thompson's house, several people had stopped them on the street to offer congratulations and curious questions. Reverend Thompson was a jovial man in his 50s who seemed delighted by the idea of performing a wedding ceremony. "Nothing I like better than joining 2 people in holy matrimony," he said, ushering them into his warm parlor. "When were you thinking of having the ceremony?" "Today, if possible," Vincent said, and when the Reverend looked surprised, he quickly added, "We have already been living together for 2 months due to circumstances, and we want to make everything proper as soon as possible." The Reverend nodded understandingly. "I can certainly perform the ceremony today, but you will need 2 witnesses. Do you have anyone in mind?" They ended up asking Mrs. Patterson and her husband, who were more than happy to serve as witnesses. Within an hour, they were all gathered in the small church, and Vincent and Nadine stood before the Reverend, holding hands and speaking their vows. Nadine wore her best dress, cleaned and mended, and Vincent had shaved and put on his least worn shirt. They did not have rings or fancy clothes or any of the trappings of a traditional wedding, but when they looked into each other's eyes and promised to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives, it felt more real and meaningful than any elaborate ceremony could have been. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thompson said with a warm smile. "You may kiss your bride, Vincent." Vincent did, pulling Nadine close and kissing her thoroughly while the Pattersons applauded and the Reverend chuckled. When they pulled apart, Nadine was blushing and smiling, and Vincent felt like his heart might burst from happiness. They celebrated with a simple meal at the town's small restaurant, the Pattersons insisting on treating them, and then they loaded up their supplies and began the journey back to the cabin. The sun was setting by the time they arrived home, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold, and Vincent carried Nadine over the threshold of the cabin that was now truly their home. That night, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion, discovering each other with gentle hands and whispered words of love. Vincent was amazed by Nadine's courage and trust, and Nadine found joy in the physical expression of the love they had been building over the past 2 months. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the fire burning low and the winter wind singing outside their windows. The rest of the winter passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Nadine threw herself into making the cabin a real home, and Vincent found himself working harder than ever on the ranch, motivated by the desire to build a good life for his wife. They talked about everything and nothing, learned each other's quirks and habits, and navigated the occasional disagreement with patience and communication. When spring finally arrived, melting the snow and turning the world green again, Vincent and Nadine stood outside their cabin and looked at the land with new eyes. "I want to expand the herd," Vincent said, his arm around Nadine's waist. "Maybe build a bigger barn and a chicken coop." "What do you think?" "I think that sounds wonderful," Nadine said, leaning into him. "And I was thinking we could plant a garden, grow our own vegetables, maybe some flowers too to make things pretty." "Anything you want," Vincent promised, kissing the top of her head. "This is your home now too." They worked together throughout the spring and summer, building their ranch and their life. Vincent taught Nadine to ride horses, and she turned out to be a natural, fearless and graceful in the saddle. She taught him to appreciate the small pleasures of life, like fresh flowers on the table and sitting on the porch in the evenings watching the sunset. They made friends with their nearest neighbors, an older couple named the Harrisons who lived 8 miles away, and occasionally made the trip into Sheridan for supplies and to attend church services. In late summer, Nadine realized she was pregnant. She was nervous to tell Vincent, worried that he might be upset or frightened by the responsibility of a child. But when she finally worked up the courage to share the news, his reaction was pure joy. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with delight, and then set her down gently, immediately worried that he had been too rough. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice as he placed his hand carefully on her still flat stomach. "A real family. Are you happy?" Nadine asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Vincent said, pulling her close. "You have given me everything I never knew I wanted, Nadine. A home, a partner, and now a child. I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," Nadine said, feeling tears of happiness well up in her eyes. "So much." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Vincent became even more protective and attentive than usual, constantly worrying about Nadine doing too much work. She tolerated his fussing with good humor, knowing it came from love, and focused on preparing for the baby's arrival. She sewed tiny clothes and blankets, and Vincent built a beautiful cradle from pine, carving delicate designs into the wood during the long winter evenings. Their son was born in March, almost exactly a year after Nadine had collapsed at Vincent's door. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Mrs. Harrison, who had experience as a midwife. But when Nadine finally held their baby boy in her arms, all the pain was forgotten. Vincent cried when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed by the tiny, perfect life they had created together. They named him Thomas, after Vincent's father, and he became the center of their world. Vincent had never imagined himself as a father, but he took to the role with surprising ease, patient and gentle with his son despite his rough exterior. Nadine watched her husband rock their baby to sleep or play with him on the floor, and she fell in love with him all over again, seeing this new side of him. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The ranch grew and prospered, and Vincent and Nadine became respected members of the small community around Sheridan. They had 2 more children, a daughter they named Violet, and another son they called James, and the cabin that had once been a lonely bachelor's dwelling became a home filled with laughter and love. Nadine never regretted her decision to stay, never looked back with longing at the life she might have had if she had married the stranger she had been traveling to meet. She had found something far better here, in this wild and beautiful place, with a man who loved her completely and children who filled her days with purpose and joy. Vincent sometimes thought about that winter night when he had heard scratching at his door, about how his life had changed in an instant when he chose to open that door and bring Nadine inside. He had saved her life that night, but in many ways, she had saved his too, bringing warmth and love and meaning to an existence that had been merely survival before she arrived. As the children grew, Vincent taught them to ride and work the ranch, while Nadine taught them to read and write and think for themselves. Thomas grew into a serious, responsible young man who loved working with the horses. Violet was bright and curious, always asking questions and reading every book she could get her hands on. James was the baby, sweet and affectionate, with a gift for making people laugh. Vincent and Nadine watched their children grow with pride and wonder, grateful every day for the family they had built together. They still made time for each other, stealing moments alone when they could, keeping the romance alive even as their lives became busier and more complicated. They would sit together on the porch after the children were asleep, holding hands and watching the stars, sometimes talking and sometimes just enjoying the comfortable silence of 2 people who knew each other completely. When the children were older, Nadine told them the story of how she had ended up at their father's door, collapsing from fever in the middle of a blizzard. The children listened with wide eyes, amazed by the dramatic beginning of their parents' love story. "You must have been so scared," Violet said to her mother. "I was," Nadine admitted, "but I was also incredibly lucky. I could have died that night, but instead I found the best life I could have imagined." "Your mother saved me too," Vincent added, pulling Nadine close. "I just did not know I needed saving until she showed me what I was missing." As the years continued to pass, Vincent and Nadine grew older together, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and harsh Wyoming winters, but their love never diminishing. They celebrated their 10th anniversary, then their 20th, then their 30th, each year bringing new challenges and new joys. They saw their children grow up and start families of their own, Thomas taking over more and more of the ranch work, Violet marrying a lawyer from Sheridan and moving to town, James becoming a skilled carpenter who built beautiful furniture. They became grandparents, delighting in the next generation and spoiling their grandchildren with love and attention. The cabin had been expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family, but Vincent and Nadine still slept in the same bed where he had once nursed her back to health, the heart of the home they had built together. On their 40th anniversary, Vincent woke early and looked at his wife sleeping beside him, her dark hair now streaked with silver, her face lined with years of laughter and hard work. She was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and he loved her more than he had thought it was possible to love another person. As if sensing his gaze, Nadine opened her eyes and smiled at him sleepily. "Good morning," she murmured, reaching out to touch his face. "Good morning," Vincent replied, catching her hand and kissing her palm. "Happy anniversary." 40 years, Nadine said wonderingly. "Can you believe it?" "Some days it feels like a lifetime," Vincent said. "Other days it feels like we just got married yesterday. Any regrets?" Nadine asked, though she already knew the answer. "Not a single one," Vincent said firmly. "Except maybe that I did not tell you I loved you sooner." Nadine laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "We had our whole lives together. We did not need to rush." "I would have given anything for more time with you," Vincent said seriously. "Every day with you has been a gift." "We still have time," Nadine pointed out, snuggling closer to him. "Lots of it, I hope." They did have more time, years more, watching their grandchildren grow and welcoming great-grandchildren into the world. The ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's management, but Vincent and Nadine were able to step back and enjoy their later years, spending time together and with family, traveling occasionally to visit Violet in town or see the grandchildren who lived farther away. They took walks together around the property, Vincent's arm around Nadine's shoulders, pointing out changes and reminiscing about the years they had spent building their life here. They sat on the porch in the evenings, just as they had done for decades, watching the sun set over the mountains and feeling grateful for every moment they had been given. When Vincent was 75 and Nadine was 69, he woke one morning to find her already awake and watching him with a soft smile. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, just as he had countless times over the years. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Nadine said. "How different my life could have been if I had not collapsed at your door that winter night. I could have died in that blizzard, or I could have ended up with that rancher I was supposed to marry, living a life that was fine but not truly mine. Instead, I got you. I got this beautiful life, these wonderful children and grandchildren, more happiness than I ever dreamed was possible." "I am the lucky one," Vincent insisted, as he always did when she talked like this. "You took a broken-down cowboy living alone in the middle of nowhere and gave him a reason to live, a reason to hope. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Nadine corrected gently. "That is what love is, Vincent. Two people choosing each other every day, building something beautiful together." Vincent kissed her softly, a gentle press of lips that held 40 years of love and devotion. "I would choose you every time," he said. "In every life, in every circumstance, I would always choose you." "And I would always choose you," Nadine promised. They spent that day together, just the two of them, walking slowly around the ranch and sitting on the porch talking and laughing about memories from over the years. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Vincent held Nadine close and felt completely at peace. He had lived a good life, a life filled with love and purpose and meaning, all because one winter night he had opened his door to a woman collapsed in the snow. The years continued to pass gently. Vincent and Nadine remained inseparable, their love story becoming something of a legend in the area around Sheridan. Young couples would seek them out, asking for advice on how to make a marriage last, and Vincent and Nadine would share their wisdom with patient humor. "Choose kindness over being right," Nadine would advise. "Talk to each other, really talk, and never go to bed angry." "Remember that you are partners," Vincent would add. "You are on the same team, facing the world together. When things get hard, and they will get hard, hold on to each other tighter instead of pulling apart." Their children and grandchildren would visit regularly, filling the expanded homestead with noise and life. Vincent loved watching Nadine with the younger generations, seeing how she lit up when surrounded by family, how she knew exactly what each child needed, whether it was comfort or encouragement or gentle discipline. She was the heart of their family, the one who kept everyone connected and remembered every birthday and made sure no one felt forgotten. When Vincent turned 80, the whole family gathered for a celebration, 3 generations coming together to honor the patriarch of the Vargas clan. There was food and music and laughter, and Vincent stood on the porch looking at all the people who had come from his union with Nadine, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. His son Thomas gave a toast, thanking his father for showing him what it meant to be a good man and a good husband, and Vincent had to wipe tears from his eyes. Later that night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Vincent and Nadine sat together in the quiet darkness, holding hands. "Did you ever imagine this?" Vincent asked. "When you were 24 and traveling west to marry a stranger, did you ever imagine you would end up here with all of this?" "Never," Nadine said honestly. "I was just trying to survive, trying to find a place in the world. I never dreamed I would find a home, a real home, or a love like this. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams, Vincent." "You gave me the same," Vincent said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "I was just existing before you, going through the motions. You taught me how to really live, how to love, how to be happy." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the familiar sounds of the Wyoming night, the wind rustling through the trees and the distant call of an owl. "I hope when my time comes I go first," Vincent said quietly. "I do not think I could bear living in this world without you." "Do not talk like that," Nadine said, squeezing his hand. "We have many more years together." But Vincent could see that she was slowing down, that the years were catching up with her. She moved more carefully now, tired more easily, though her mind was still sharp and her spirit undimmed. He worried about her constantly, though he tried not to let his worry show. The next few years were gentle ones, Vincent and Nadine settling into their 80s with grace and gratitude. They spent their days mostly at home, tending to a small garden and enjoying visits from family. Vincent made sure Nadine had everything she needed, anticipating her wants before she could voice them, just as he had done when he first nursed her back to health all those decades ago. On a crisp autumn morning, when the leaves were turning gold and red, and the air held the promise of winter, Nadine woke feeling more tired than usual. She spent the day resting, surrounded by family who had come for Sunday dinner, and Vincent never left her side, holding her hand and making sure she was comfortable. As the sun began to set, she looked at him with eyes full of love and said, "It has been a beautiful life, Vincent. The most beautiful life." "It is not over yet," Vincent said, but his voice shook with fear because he could see something in her eyes, some acceptance of an ending he was not ready to face. "Not over," Nadine agreed softly. "But if it were, I want you to know that I have no regrets. Every day with you was a gift. Every moment was worth living." She fell asleep that evening surrounded by her children and grandchildren, Vincent holding her hand, and she slipped away peacefully just as the last light faded from the sky. Vincent felt the moment she left, felt the loss of her like a physical wound, and the cry of grief that tore from his throat brought the whole family to tears. The days after Nadine's death were the darkest of Vincent's life, darker even than the years after.